One of the most fascinating things about the NFL is what we as fans can't see. And while the league tries to present a squeaky clean image to the public eye, there's actually quite a long list of scandals in the history of the NFL. Probably the most well-known football scandal is Tom Brady's Deflategate. And while that certainly is bad, it doesn't even come close to the darkest scandal in NFL history. Cheating in football is one thing, but headhunting opponents brings a whole new set of moral questions outside of sports entirely. Let's talk about Bountygate. Now, the idea about setting bounties or giving players under the table bonuses to injure other players isn't specific to the scenario we're talking today. It's a long been rumored that bounty systems existed in the NFL, with one of the first being Buddy Ryan's in the 1980s, and some players have speculated that up to 40% of the league had been actively participating in them until this point. In 2012, a report revealed the Bounty Gate that we will be discussing, and it quickly became a national news story. The very first time it made the news was in 2009 when the New Orleans Saints played the Minnesota Vikings in the NFC Championship game. All throughout the game, Vikings quarterback Brett Favre took vicious hits. It got so bad that even several of his teammates were starting to wonder if New Orleans was intentionally trying to injure Favre without having any prior knowledge of Bountygate's existence. Favre was even knocked out of the game for some time after taking a hit below the knee, and the Saints went on to win 31-28. At the time, the 2009 Saints Super Bowl run was ultimately the feel-good story. The city of New Orleans felt like they had bounced back from the tragedy of Hurricane Katrina, even though its impact was still very visible 4 years later. The Saints had historically been one of the worst teams in football for the entirety of their existence, but the citizens of Louisiana rallied around them and supported them to their very first Lombardi Trophy. However, that feel-good story factor was jeopardized in the 2010 offseason when the NFL received a tip from an anonymous player that the Saints were running a bounty ring, causing a subsequent investigation into the New Orleans practices. The investigation didn't lead to anything at first, but the NFL finally put together evidence of the illegal bounty ring in the spring of 2012, pinning most of the blame on defensive coordinator Gregg Williams, who not only organized the ring but also supplemented the prize pools used to incentivize the players. While Sean Payton didn't directly fund the ring, he was also cited for intentionally trying to cover up the scandal and having knowledge of it without shutting it down. The whistleblower was Mike Cirillo, a defensive assistant who had been released by the Saints way back in 2009 when the program first started. He was one of the ones who gave the NFL serious insight into how the ring was functioning, and that Williams was the man behind it all. Cirillo's information was pivotal as it provided detailed accounts of meetings where bounties were discussed, amounts were set, and players were rewarded. His testimony was supported by other sources, including former players and coaches who had left the Saints or were in the league at the time. The bounty system, as he described it, was essentially a cash reward scheme for injuring opposing players, particularly key playmakers. The system was in place for multiple seasons and involved payments for injuries that led to players being taken out of the game with higher payouts for more significant injuries. Up to 27 Saints defensive players were reportedly aware of the program and participated eagerly, driven by both the promises of financial gain and a culture of aggression fostered by their coaches. The investigation uncovered that Gregg Williams had been operating this program with the direct support of some Saints players and coaches. He not only encouraged this behavior, but was also known to boast around the effectiveness of the program and the money players could make. One of the most shocking revelations was how exactly Williams awarded these payments, which were both for knockouts and cart-offs. Cart-offs were hits where players were either taken on the cart or stretcher, usually due to a ligament injury, but occasionally due to severe head injuries. For these, defenders were awarded $1,000. Additionally, for knockouts, hits where players were either forced to leave the game or miss significant time during the season, defenders were awarded $1,500. These amounts were increased during the playoffs. The NFL's investigation revealed that bounty program was not just a one-time occurrence, but rather a systematic approach to undermining opponents and gaining an unfair advantage. The league's probe extended beyond the immediate practices of the Saints, suggesting that similar programs could have been in place with other teams, although no direct evidence was found linking other teams to such schemes. Ultimately, Favre was not the only player found to be targeted, as Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Matt Hasselbeck, Marshawn Lynch, and others had bounties placed on them in games during the 2011 season. While other names were not confirmed, as very likely many injuries were intentionally caused over the course of 3 seasons, Bountygate took place. As you would expect, the fallout from Bountygate was severe, with the NFL imposing some of the harshest penalties in league history. Gregg Williams was suspended indefinitely, with his return subject to further review. Sean Payton, the head coach of the Saints, was suspended for the entire 2012 season, and the Saints were also fined $500,000. They lost second-round draft picks in 2012 and 2013 as well. The scandal cast a long shadow over the league, raising questions about player safety, ethics, and the integrity of the game. The impact of Bountygate was felt across the entire NFL. The scandal prompted the league to implement stricter rules and regulations to improve player safety and protect players from intentional injuries, including enhanced penalties for dangerous hits and an increased scrutiny of coaching and player conduct. The league's focus shifted towards promoting a culture of respect and safety, highlighting a need for a more transparent and ethical approach to coaching and gameplay. Some suggested that the league needed to do more. In the wake of Bountygate, the NFL faced criticism from across the media landscape, including former players, health professionals, and the general public. Critics argue that the league had been too lenient in addressing the issue and that the penalties imposed did not fully address the damage caused by the scandal. Some suggested that the league needed to do more to prevent similar incidents in the future and to address the broader issue of player safety in a more comprehensive manner. Despite the severe penalties, Bountygate did not entirely tarnish the reputation of the New Orleans Saints or their fans. The team and its supporters continued to celebrate their Super Bowl victory. Although the shadow of the scandal loomed over their achievements, the Saints faced an uphill battle to rebuild their reputation and restore trust within the league, and the team's performance on the field became a focal point for fans and analysts, who likely and closely scrutinized their games. The scandal also had a lasting impact on the career of those involved. Gregg Williams' suspension and subsequent banishment from the league marked a significant downfall for a coach who had previously been known for his aggressive defensive strategies. Sean Payton's suspension not only affected his career but also the team's performance during the 2012 season. Both Williams and Payton faced challenges in rehabilitating their image and returning to the league, with Williams eventually returning to coaching after a several-year hiatus and Payton managing to rebuild his career with the Saints. Jonathan Vilma, Anthony Hargrove, Will Smith, and Scott Fujita were the four players suspended for their participation in the program, as well as general manager Mickey Loomis, who lied to NFL officials saying he was unaware of the situation. The Bountygate scandal exposed a dark side of competitive athletics, where the quest for victory can sometimes lead individuals and teams to compromise their principal values. It heightened and highlighted the need for integrity and management of professional sports and the importance of prioritizing player safety and their fair play. As the NFL continues to evolve and adapt to the changing landscape of sports, the lessons learned from Bountygate remain relevant. The league's effort to address player safety, promote ethical conduct, and maintain the integrity of the game are ongoing, and the impact of past scandals serve as a reminder of the importance of upholding the highest standard of conduct in professional sports. Bountygate stands as one of the darkest chapters in NFL history, not merely for the financial penalties or suspensions it brought, but for the profound questions it raised about the nature of competition, the ethics of coaching, and the well-being of players. It is a stark reminder that, while football simply is a game, the people who play it are real humans who are risking their health on every single play. With that in mind, intentionally trying to injure someone and providing bonuses for having them removed on a stretcher or knocked out of a game is simply disgusting. In that act, not only were they attempting to take someone out of a game, which is egregious enough on its own, but they also could damage that person's livelihood and even their long-term health. Many former players have recently come out with CTE diagnoses, including Jason Kelce and Antonio Brown. On that same note, many former players have also died far too young over the past few years, like Demaryius Thomas and most recently, Jacoby Jones. Those hits to the head add up over time and seriously contribute to tragedies like these and many others that have happened over the years. The one good thing to come from Bountygate was the huge advancement in player safety in the 2010s, whereas the players had basically been afforded no protections previously. Of course, there was a major crackdown on player bounties, at least as far as we know, but many other aspects of the game were also made significantly safer for the players involved. One of the big changes was how defenders were actually supposed to tackle. In the past, linebackers were taught to lead with the crown of their helmet, a form that constantly created helmet-to-helmet contact, which resulted in these catastrophic brain injuries. Now, that type of contact is completely prohibited. Another example is how quarterbacks are treated. While there certainly is room for improvement in calling how defenders are allowed to tackle quarterbacks, it is certainly best to side on the way of leniency towards protecting a player rather than exposing them to much danger. While the scandal's efforts on the NFL are very well known, it has a broad impact on other professional sports leagues and organizations. Many professional sports leagues around the world began to examine their own practices and policies to ensure they were not encouraging or condoning similar unethical behavior. The emphasis on player safety and ethical conduct became a broader trend, leading to more rigorous standards and regulations aimed at protecting athletes and maintaining the integrity of the game. While it is regrettable that Bountygate ever took place under the watch of the NFL, which is supposed to protect the players of the NFL, it is truly mind-blowing to see someone in the inner workings of the league in a scandal like this one. The NFL is put on a pedestal as the premier sports league in the U.S., but things still slip through the cracks, and it honestly doesn't seem like that much of a rarity. The NFL has had several major scandals in the past decade, including the Deflategate, as I mentioned earlier, Spygate, where the Patriots tried videotaping other coaches' signals, or even major players like Calvin Ridley betting on games. That's everything you need to know about one of the darkest scandals in NFL history, Bountygate. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and be sure to comment on what scandal you would like us to explore next.